But what I realized was after one or two videos started getting success, my first video got 50,000 views. I said, I just need to put out content. I need to see what happens. So I made 2 videos a day for about a month. I put it out. I wasn't analyzing the data at first. At first, I was just getting a feel for the platform. How do I make content? How do I record my screen? Like, what are the best kinds of video editing styles for me to do? Do I even need to edit my video, right? To me, that was a big piece of it. Before I even understood the data, it was how do you make content?
Welcome back to the podcast where we explore the creator economy and how you can succeed in it. Our guest today is the founder of Social for the Win, a TikTok consultancy and content development studio, a former TikTok employee, but also a successful creator with over 500,000 followers in their own right. Jacob Wallach, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jake. I really appreciate it. Super excited to chat.
Oh man, I'm really pumped. We've been talking a lot off camera, which is probably a bad idea. We should really just hit record as soon as people join in because we get a lot of gold nuggets. But I wanted to give you a bit of an introduction to the creators listening to this podcast. Like, you've got a bit of credibility. You run your own consultancy. You are a former TikTok employee, and you know your stuff because you have been creating and you've got a bit of a following there too. Like, is there anything else you haven't done? Like you've got the good nest of information here that we can leverage. Did I leave anything out else that is a reserve?
Absolutely not. The only thing I would say too is that, it's been really great working on the creative side of this business. But even before I was at TikTok, I worked in the data space. So I used to work for Nielsen, a big market research firm. So, really understanding the nuance between data and creative. And that's just something that I really try to pride myself on in how I've kind of built my name in the business so far.
Yeah. What was your role at TikTok, if you don't mind me asking? What were you doing?
Yeah,
there?
Absolutely. So I was a client solutions manager. Essentially, what I would do is help certain brands understand the platform, develop a strategy, very much in the advertising side of the business. So I was there for about 2 years. I was helping brands like Coca-Cola, Hershey's, Ben & Jerry's, Campbell's, and Mars develop their strategy. So for a long time, my main client was Mars. So think like Skittles, M&Ms, Twix, Starburst, Skittles, every confection brand under the sun. I used to call myself the Willy Wonka of TikTok, minus the hat can. And trust me, you don't want to see me do a somersault. It's really bad. But, I was really helping them understand all the nuances to the platform. The role was really sell ads, sell advertising, build a relationship with the brand. But what I wanted to do was really help them understand how you create really great and engaging content, build a community on these platforms. But at the core, it was, how do you develop a really great media buying practice and target the right audience? How do you create really unique concepts on this platform that are native to TikTok, but also applicable to your brand? And finally, who are the right influencers and creators to work with to help you amplify your voice and build out content that, is essentially created from these concepts that we developed? And that was kind of the core of what I did.
And then when did you decide to sort of step out into your own consultancy, leveraging all the skills that you sort of used and built?
Yeah, so I've always known that I wanted to start my own company. Even when I worked for Nielsen, it was a 40,000 person, company. It was huge. And I decided to go to TikTok because I knew it was a little bit smaller. But over time, I think the political scene of the company just didn't necessarily work out for me. I felt that, I could probably do a little bit more on my own. I actually went to a startup right after TikTok, and unfortunately, the opportunity didn't really work out how I wanted it to. But I realized that, having this unique experience of being somebody who was in-house and seeing behind the veil of TikTok, but also having been successful as a creator was a unique position. So I felt it was the right time. It was the right experience. And at this point in my life, I figured, why the hell not?
What's the favorite part about running your own show now, working with creators? What do you enjoy the most about what you do?
Yeah, I think selfishly, it's not really answering to anybody. That was always my biggest thing in the corporate space. When I was working in the corporate world, I was always kind of looking for somebody to hitch my wagon to, meet somebody who I thought was incredibly charismatic and intelligent, really understood the industry, but was also very encouraging of my growth. And I never really found it. And I think for me, one of the biggest things was, well, if nobody's going to do it for me and nobody's going to help me out to that regard, why can't I be that to myself? So I think that's been the biggest thing. I think the hardest part has been like managing my time because it's like I can do whatever I want throughout the entire day, but what do I do that's actually going to be effective and drive real growth opportunity? But I think the biggest thing for me has been like communicating with a lot of other people in the industry, at agencies, at brands, and kind of validating a little bit more about what I do and that I'm on the right path, which has been really, really helpful.
How do you manage your time? Because you still create content regularly and then do or operate your consultancy, and then you're making all these connections, building relationships, sitting on meetings, then going ahead and then connecting with the people that you work with inside the consultancy. Like, how does your time split look like?
Yeah, it's actually really challenging to make content.
Mm,
One of the things that I preach in my consultancy is consistency. And
mm,
I think like most people, it's hard to take your own advice. So, for me, for a long time, I was really creating content on a consistent basis. And then I think creator fatigue just kind of took over, right? Like, am I good at Excel? Absolutely. Do I love being in Excel every day? No, not really. But it was a niche that I found that was really interesting, and I thought I had the experience and the skill set to take a part of it. But in terms of balancing my time, it really has been a majority just building sales opportunities, right? Having these conversations, leveraging them into hopefully, events, panels, uh, obviously podcast opportunities as well.
mm.
And just to kind of get my name out there. And that's what I've realized. Like, it's a little tough because being Excel Daddy is great. Nobody really nobody really knew that I was him.
Mm.
Um, but to me, it was like, it's not. I can't leverage Excel Daddy in the same way as other people can leverage their social media accounts in the marketing space. But what I can do is use that as like a really great case study to say, hey, I've done this already. I worked at the company. Let me leverage that as a reason why I can work with certain brands. But it really is like all about the hunt. Like that's what I'm doing right now. Hunting for brands, hunting for agencies, and just continuing to build the conversation.
Yeah, that's got to be so tough trying to manage the work that you do in a space and then trying to create content. I know because I do a lot of, now I'm starting to ramp up my UGC work.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about this before. And for creators that have
Yep.
been listening to this podcast, you've probably heard me start to talk about my journey, go through that. And to manage what I do throughout the day as a sort of working in a gym, then to come home and then create content and consult for brands, to then when it comes to creating my own content, I'm like, oh, I'm so
Yeah.
de-energized. I'm burnt out. I'm not burnt. I'm just tired. I'm like, it's the end of the day. It's the last thing I can think of doing. Like it's not easy trying to balance all that. When you were starting out Excel Daddy and building that, because you were working sort of for other people, did you find it was a lot easier to create content?
Yeah, it was. I think, and I know we haven't really touched upon this, but when I started, I was just so enthusiastic. I was super
Yeah.
passionate about it. Like, I put out 70 videos in my first month.
Yeah.
I didn't even care about the quality. I was just like, let's do it. Let's put out content. Let's see what happens. And I had like 10, and I've told you this before, I had like 10,000 followers in 2 days. I got 100,000 in a month. I got 300 or 100,000 in a week and 300,000 followers in a month, because I had one video get like 5 million views and it just completely blew up. And it was, and I don't know if you've experienced it, but like like from that experience, it was like, I see why social media is so addicting. I see why people go like crave the likes. Like, I always hated it. But, for me, I think the biggest thing about making content is like, can you batch it, right? Like, is there an opportunity that you can take a day over the weekend or even just like a couple hours and make 5-10 videos? For what I do, that's actually really not that hard to do. I think when it's people who are focused more on like relevancy, like people who speak about the news or journalists or anything that's like going on in the industry, it's very hard to batch content if you don't want it, like, or else it's going to be stale. But what I do is like an Excel creator, the things that I can put out are applicable in any given time, right? Like, I've made some videos that were about Apple stock. I've made 1 or 2 videos about, or I don't even know if I've like posted them, but I've made some on my end about Holland, and like the soccer player, and like, what's going on in the in the Premier League and all that, because I thought it was interesting and you can look at the data. But for the most part, if you can batch the content, you can get it out, great. But it's something that you really have to just take an hour, get it done wherever it is. But kind of what I've heard about people doing at the gym is they go in the very beginning of their day to get it done. Maybe what you have to do is do that for content.
Yeah. And I wanted to touch on the addictive part of the social media. And I remember when I first started TikTok, I was so I was doing everything I could get to 1,000 followers so I could go live. I was like, I
Mm-hmm.
want to go live and talk to an audience and really get my
Yeah.
voice out there. That was it. But then I found this weird, I don't know if it was an exploit or not, but it was, I would post a video and
Mm-hmm.
immediately go live.
Yep.
And that smashed my view count so
Mm-hmm.
freaking high. I was like, and I still get addicted to that. I was going live every night for hours,
Yeah.
going on live, whatever. I hit 30,000 followers, and I was like, holy shit, this is real. Social, like I could do something here. And then tape it, and I was like, oh, what's going on? And then I had that one big video sometime last year,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like 2 million views, bunch of comments. I was like, this is the worst video I've ever put together. Literally a screen recording and then captions over the screen recording on and poor edit, and just went nuts. And I was like, so sometimes, yeah, I was like, yeah, I understand. And then to this day, I haven't reached any form of glory ever near that hype. And I'm like, yep, it is addictive, but it's super powerful. And again, it's still hard for me to create as much content. Yeah. And I'm like, well, if I get up, I could probably get up at 4 a.m. and batch content, but I'm going to be so tired doing that content anyway. So it's like finding that balance for the creator, really, to in their lifestyle, whether or not, you do it one night earlier in the week, you get home at 5 o'clock from work and you go and do all your content then, and you just pump out 5 videos, 5, 6, 7 videos or whatever it is. And you contextualize your ideas and build them out over the weekend, just sort of on the side. So then you get to that Monday and then you've got your content there. Like, you've got to find a strategy that works, right?
Absolutely. And I think it really depends on, what the style of content you're doing is, right? Because there are people who go out there, right, and they just vlog about their day. And it's easy, it's not hard. Like, I know people who do like a day in the life, right? And that's a very popular trend on TikTok. But, some of them just do it like they're holding their camera up and they're just like showing their day, but a lot of people do some very intense video editing for that, right? It all depends on the quality of the content that you want, how much you actually need to put into it. I think a lot of people think I can pick up a phone and do content. And I think we all know that you can't. It's not that easy. But, if you're in a niche, or the content that you make is easier to do, and you can just put up a green screen and an image and talk, and you've seen success doing that, then you don't need to batch. And all you need to do is segment out 10 minutes of your time, film it all on TikTok directly, and just edit it within the platform. For creators like myself, I can't do that. I need to like screen record and then video edit and splice everything and put in the captions and all this other stuff. But I think if you can go into it looking at how do I make my content low lift, not low effort, but easier to get done. And instead of batch editing, even just doing like one video every other day that's like takes 20, 30 minutes, and focusing on consistency being a long term instead of like short term, I need to post every single day for 2 months, versus I'd rather post 2-3 times a week for a year. Then I think it's all about the perspective of how you look at the content.
Yeah. And then that's completely different for every creator. You just kind of got to, I like the phrase low lift. And it's just making me think I just signed up for CapCut Premium because I don't want to have to upload to Google Drive and then download from Google Drive to then my computer and then import into CapCut if I want to edit on my PC, versus, I record in CapCut, upload straight to CapCut on my PC, and I've just saved myself all this time. And sometimes my videos don't bloody upload on my Google Drive on my phone, or it takes forever. And I'm like,
just
I'm
waste
walking around the house going, I need this instantaneous. So that's a little hack that I have, just like paying like sort of $12 a month is just a bit more direct.
The admin is crazy. If you didn't have to do admin work to get stuff done, people would be making content so much more. And I think people would do a lot of different things in their lives if they didn't have to do the basic busy work that they have to do to get things done.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you did you ever monetize your TikTok? Did you have were you trying to monetize it at all? Was that ever the goal once you sort of saw that success, very rapidly?
Yeah, originally it wasn't really my thought. I just was in the moment. And I'm like, oh, this is really cool. I blew up on TikTok. It became like a big thing for me. And the nicest part about it wasn't the opportunity to monetize, but to really gain trust with my clients. At TikTok, there aren't a lot of people who are creators. I think during my time there, I knew maybe 2 or 3 people that had bigger followings than me in the whole company.
Yeah.
And, for me, it was just like, hey, I built this really great thing. I've seen success. Let me use that as a way to build trust with my clients and then potentially look at other things. The monetization piece of it is really interesting because I feel like most people don't really think about that until they've actually become successful.
Mm-hmm.
I've monetized a little bit. I think where I'm at right now in my life, I've really been focusing on my business. But
Yeah.
as the holidays kind of come up and things slow down and people aren't trying to have conversations, I might go all in for the next month and just focus on Excel Daddy, build a ton of content, and just start making some documents and templates to actually sell. I think where I kind of sit, the monetization strategy is pretty simple. It's Excel content, it's all education. build some templates in Excel that are unique, that provide value. I've thought about making a course. To be honest, I feel like most of the courses on Excel are pretty boring, very overpriced. If I was going to do it, I would want to do it with very high video editing, like very, very, very high quality. And I'm not really in a position where I can take 3 to 4 weeks to just kind of do it and go into a studio and film. But absolutely, I look at it more as like a long term. I think when I was building this out, I didn't really know what I was going to do. And I started reading more about it. Obviously brand partnerships I thought would have been amazing, but I'm like, not even like in a niche. I'm in a super niche, where most, if not almost all of my content is about Microsoft Excel, and Microsoft isn't going to pay me for that. They know that I can just I do the content for me for free for them. They get awareness. But I think when I first started out, if I had a few templates that I already knew I wanted to do, and I already, before I really saw the success of Excel Daddy, I probably would have been able to monetize it more. But yeah, I definitely think a lot about the monetization strategy. I know exactly how I want to implement it. It's just, can and will I put in the time to do it?
Yeah. So when you put out the first 70 videos, did you analyze your data, or did you just pump out 70 videos and then look at the stuff later? What was the strategy there? How did you know when to double down on what was working for you?
Yeah.
Can you walk us through that? Because I'm super curious about the decision behind, do I just make 70 videos, upload them, and then come back and look at it all later? Or do I create 70 videos as I review what's working?
Yeah. So I did a lot of research on the platform before I even started posting. And I'll take a step back. Like, that's why I decided to start Excel Daddy. For me, I was known as the Excel guy at TikTok. I had one or two friends send me videos and they're like, Jacob, is this you? And I was like, no, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to do that. I had another TikTok account where I was posting like anime memes and stuff, which got like 11,000 followers. And I'm like, cool. But like, now I actually need to do something real on TikTok, which was Excel Daddy. And, I did a lot of research. I saw there were about 50 accounts teaching Microsoft Excel. Half of them were not in English. Of the half that were in English, 25, half of those, about 10 to 12, were posting consistently. Every single one had 100,000 followers, every single one. And I'm like, it would be foolish for me not to do this. It felt like a 2017 Bitcoin moment. I was, graduating college. A lot of my friends were talking about Bitcoin. They invested. I didn't. And it felt like, another moment like that. But for me, when I originally put out content, I wasn't thinking about it like that. I was just like, let's get content out. Let's see what works. I created this character that was a little flirtatious. I called people dumb. I said, hey, you don't know what you're doing at work, but in like a more sassy and sarcastic tone. And keep in mind, I never showed my face. Like, it was the green screen, the eyes and the mouth filter. And my whole thought was, let's just get content. Like, I've never done this before. I never did any content. Like, I watched a ton of TV. I watched a ton of TikToks, but I never posted. And I was always nervous about it. I was always nervous about showing my face. And, obviously the judgment that comes along with social media, which is why I hid behind the character. But what I realized was, after one or two videos started getting success, my first video got 50,000 views. I said, I just need to put out content. I need to see what happens. So I made 2 videos a day for about a month. I put it out. I wasn't analyzing the data at first. At first, I was just getting a feel for the platform. How do I make content? How do I record my screen? Like, what are the best kinds of video editing styles for me to do? Do I even need to edit my video? Right? To me, that was a big piece of it. Before I even understood the data, it was, how do you make content? And how do you make content that works, right? And you can kind of get a feel before you even analyze the data, what's doing well, what's not doing well, some of the hooks, some of the content and the body of the content. But a lot of what I did was research other platforms, other creators. I was like, okay, well, if this one piece of content, which I thought was mediocre, did really well, got, 1 million views, maybe I can make a similar video, not the same, put my twist on it, educate people on that similar topic, but in my own way, right? And I saw tremendous success. What I really started to do is after those 70 videos, kind of like what you asked me before, Jake, like went along that path that I analyzed. After I put out all the content, I took a deep dive. I said, okay, well, and this was before TikTok started giving a ton of information. They give a lot more now. When I first started in 2021, they gave like a little bit, not even how many followers you got from the content, but the watch time, the average watch time, engagement, like shares, comments, saves, where in the world or the country that people were actually viewing the content from. It was very like minimal data. So it was difficult. But what I did was I kind of sat down, I went through all my videos. I said, okay, let's look at the top 15 performing videos. Okay, what did that look like, right? Where were people watching along that timeline? When did they drop off? When did they, like my biggest problem is you don't get to really see all the data. Like what I would love to see is where along the video and the life cycle of that piece of content is somebody liking it? Is somebody commenting on it? Did I say something a little weird in like sentence in like second 6 or second 15 where somebody's like, oh, okay, I'm calling XL Daddy out for that. Unfortunately, you don't have the data to really piece all of that information together. But my thought is you can kind of extrapolate on a little bit of it. Look at it holistically. Check out your top 15 best performing, your lowest 15 worst performing. Why did those succeed? Why did those not from a creative standpoint? And then you can use the data to back up why that worked. You are going to have to, estimate it a little bit. And it is an art and a science, use data, but you also need to understand it from your own perspective and the perspective of the people that are watching your content. So it's not as easy as just looking at data. But I think as you kind of grow and as you put out more content, the thing that I think is the best is make 10, 15, 20 videos all in a similar style. It doesn't need to be the exact same topic. It doesn't need to be the exact same hook, but keep it so that way you can A/B test your content, right? Let's say I have a similar background, similar lighting, not the same hook, but a similar hook. Put it out there 10, 15 times. Okay, well, so on 3 of these videos, they did really well, but the other 12 of them didn't. Okay, so it wasn't the hook. What else was in there? Okay, well, people stayed. The hook wasn't great, but the body of the content was really good. The video editing was really good here versus the other piece of content. How do I now leverage those insights? Lean into what you're doing that's already finding success. Lean out of what's not finding success. And you use data as more of an estimate, not necessarily a guarantee, because you don't have, like I said before, the true information and the true data. You just have to, take a guess and experiment.
That was one thing I did when so once I saw the success of all those followers come through, I was like, okay, I actually need to double down on the content that's working. And at the time, it was more of the body of the content. I was like, how can I make this relatable and engage the person? And it was like, I still think the content I saw the best because for the creators and those who don't know, as well as yourself, like I talked a lot about self-help, my personal experience, things that I'd gone through in my life with anxiety, self-esteem, relationships, things like getting ghosted and all these things. So when I made the content, and it was something that you said there, was I put myself in the shoes of the person that I was trying to speak to, so that I would understand what they would relate to and what I had experienced, and tried to put that information or the video together in that way. Yeah. And I found that kind of content where I really thought about the person I was trying to engage and where they might be in their life, how I could deliver the information I wanted to in the video to them in a way that was relatable, and it touched on sort of, I guess, in my instance, their pain points, because that's what I was trying to resonate with and get them to come. And it was the videos where I was talking about like, you got ghosted, and certain situations
You would have
around
hooked me on
dating.
that, by the way. You would have hooked me on the ghosted thing. Yeah.
Everyone should have been ghosted at least once or twice in their life, but like ghosted on Tinder, all these dating apps, like just talking about that kind of stuff. But it was like, that was really resonating. And so I sort of leaned into that, and I leaned into things like anxiety, self-confidence. And then there were things I'd talk about, like I like business. I was a business owner. I wanted to talk a little bit about that myself. Every time I went to talk about that or deliver that content, I'd have to lean back out because nobody was really resonating with me and that. So I didn't test enough content in that space, but I already had enough data from my first 30,000 followers with all the views and the engagement I was getting that people were resonating with my content in that space. And so that's what I really spoke about for the longest period of time until I kind of burnt out.
Yeah.
And I started pivoting in my life. And then I was like, oh, I don't know what to talk about now, because I was like in that weird transition. But for that period of time, I was able to lean into that stuff because
I have to say, I feel like the weird transition, like I'm currently going through it. I feel like so many people go, and especially when you're in your late 20s, early 30s, like that is such a crazy time in your life where, like I have friends getting married or who are already married and looking to have kids. Like I'm totally single, so it's like people are moving at very different paces. Like, I'm building my business, you're doing your content. Like it's such a weird time for so many people. And I think the biggest thing about the content stuff, and I know we talked about this before, the way I look at it, it's really two things. How are you providing value, right? Is it informational, educational, entertaining? Like what is coming across that somebody feels like I learned something, right? And I think anybody can do that. I've literally spoken to Uber drivers who, are from like I had an Uber driver in Miami who was from, Cuba, and he barely spoke English. But I said to him, listen, like there's a huge Hispanic market in America. There's a huge Hispanic market, Spanish speaking market in the world. He said he was a PE teacher. He knew physical education, physical fitness. I said, listen, you can make really great content. And even if obviously this skill set to a certain degree, but even if you knew something where it was like, you knew 10% of this content, right? To everybody else who knows more than you might seem like a fool, but to anybody who knows less than you seem like an expert. And I'm not saying that like to go out there and trick people into thinking you know what you're talking about. But what I'm thinking is more like, if I like to cook and I'm a home cook and, I have a friend who doesn't know anything and I teach them how to boil pasta, like they're amazed. They're like, oh, you just taught me how to boil pasta. This is great. And now you can learn the next thing. So to me, I think anybody can really make content that provides that value. But the other thing is that relevancy and that relatability, not just relevancy is like what's going on in the macroeconomic space, what's going on in the world, but, relevant to your life. Like we were talking about before, the perspective of the person watching the content and how do you relate? So even with some of the stuff that you were talking about with your business, like if you're talking about it from, two different perspectives, like if you're talking about it like, okay, I had this day, this is what we did. I'm a business owner, blah, blah, blah. Maybe you might just be going to people who own businesses, right? But if you're framing it more as like almost like a corporate thing, like, I left the corporate space to go out and do this, do this job on my own. Like, here's the scary thing about doing that. Or here's why I'm really glad I left the corporate space. Because if you look at it, the applicability is so high, right? With Excel, and I'm using my own example, everybody who works a corporate job, no matter what you do, you could be in sales, marketing, finance, like you use Excel to some degree. So to me, it's, how do you make things applicable to the person that you're trying to reach, but how do you broaden the scope of what that looks like? And I think your business content, I think would do really well, especially because you already found success in the way that you deliver content. It's just a matter of framing it in the right way. And I think that's the difference.
Yeah. And I'm hearing you because I know what you're saying. And I'm like, I just wasn't in that time where I was like going to double down on that sort of content. But one thing that's very fascinating, and I learned this concept recently, is there's sort of three different sort of pillars of content creators. And if you're afraid of putting out content that you're not, because people will call you out if you're not a professional and you're trying to act better than everyone, like you know more. There's three ways you can come at it. You can be the professional who's done all the research and you can talk about it from the professional perspective. You can talk about something, any topic that you want from a day in your life perspective, just showing vlogging sort of style, like this is what I'm doing, I'm trying to work through this anxiety, I'm going on a date later, I'm very nervous. Or you could go from the how to in the trenches type thing. This is what I'm working on. This is what I've learned as I'm going through this. You might want to apply this to your life too. So like sort of three avenues of ways you can present yourself with the content. And if you're a creator, that's something you consider. I think I've touched on this a couple of times in a few podcasts that actually haven't come out yet, but you'll probably hear me repeat myself a few times there. This is the last question I had, and
Sure.
I've completely said we probably should have asked this way earlier in terms of your content strategy, but because you were working at TikTok, was TikTok the first platform you were just like, yeah, I have to be on TikTok? Or did you consider YouTube? Did you consider podcasting? Did you consider Instagram? Or how did you make that decision on what platform you wanted to be on?
Yeah, it's really hard to figure out what you're going to do. Just generally, it's incredibly overwhelming. You know, there are people looking at maybe like I think like three major, social media platforms, right? I guess TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. But when you look at that secondary or tertiary level, there are 5-10 more apps, right? Are you going to be on X? Are you going to be on Snapchat? Are you going to be doing, Reddit? Are you going on Tumblr? Like there's so many platforms to be on. And I think to me, it was like, I work for TikTok. I know the platform. I know the ad products. Let me just go on this. And I think the biggest thing for me was the acceleration of growth, right? And I think that at the core, and I know we chatted about this before, like, I grew up with Instagram. Like that was my platform. Like I was in high school from 2009 to 2013. And like, that's kind of when Instagram was coming out. Like I was, in college from 2014 to 2017. And that's when Instagram really took off. And it made me feel horrible. Like I would go on Instagram and I'd see all these very attractive people holding up like a Red Bull and an iPhone. And I'm like, cool products, whatever. But they'd be talking about their perfect lives and traveling all over the world. And it just didn't make me feel good. And to me, I always hated social media. It was the bane of my existence. I was shocked I ever went into social media. I went into TikTok thinking it was an entertainment media platform, not social media.
Yeah.
And, from my perspective, TikTok felt like it was a place that you could be a little bit more like yourself. I think all these platforms change. They're moving more into a social media platform. And I'll get back to your actual main question. It's like, to me, I think it all depends on where you feel comfortable putting out content and what your goal is. My goal was growth. I wanted to get on TikTok. I put out one video and it got 50,000 views. I didn't even think about going to Instagram or YouTube or anywhere else. I was just like, let's get it done on TikTok. Let's build. The hardest part about that is, looking back on it, the monetization opportunity. I think where you really monetize is with YouTube. If you want to make money from the platform, you go to YouTube. If you want to make the most money from brands, I think you go to Instagram. If you want to build the fastest, I think you go to TikTok. All these platforms are changing never-endingly. But, at the end of the day, TikTok is not based off of a follower graph. It's based off of a content graph. You can have 1 million followers and get 5,000 views on a video. But if you go to Instagram, trust me, if you have 1 million followers, you're not getting 5,000 views on a reel. So, to me, I still think the best opportunity for growth is TikTok. What I do with my company is TikTok first. As YouTube and Instagram have created reels and shorts, everybody is moving towards short form. TikTok is moving towards longer form content. I was just interviewed for that with somebody at The Information. She, this woman, Kaya Yuriev, wrote a great article. But I think for me, if you're going to build on social media, go with TikTok. Repurpose your content onto Instagram, onto YouTube Shorts, on other platforms, but don't overwhelm yourself. We talked about it before, Jake. Like being a creator is incredibly stressful. There's so much that you have to do just from an admin perspective. And if you want to, even setting up a business, if you're going to set up a business like an LLC, I think it's super easy to overcomplicate it. But one of my dad's favorite quotes that he's always said to me is, it's not even a quote. It's just a sentence, right? It's KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. Just do one thing, put it out there, see what works. Try it on different platforms as you grow. But to go in and think you're going to grow on 5-10 platforms all at the same speed, all with the same kind of consistency would be foolish. So that's my take.
I was going to ask you, what do you think creators should focus on going forward after listening to the show? But you actually just beat me to it. And you've done that a couple times today where I'm like, oh, I'm going to ask him this question. And then you would just lead into that naturally. I'm like, There goes my question.
Well, I'm glad I'm an easy podcast person.
It's so easy. You make my job so much easier. Jacob, thank you so much for sharing your insights into monetization, how you built your platform, where you're heading as a sort of a creator, and what you're doing as a consultant. It's been super fun to have this conversation with you. And again, thank you to the creators and anyone else listening to the podcast on all things of brand monetization, building your TikTok, what you can do to build your brand, the insights Jacob has provided. It's been a really fun conversation. Yeah, thank you very much, Jacob.
Awesome. I really appreciate it, Jake. Really appreciate the time.
Yep.